It's been a couple weeks since I last sat in front of the camera for a multitude of reasons. One of which you'll learn about here shortly, but the other was really I wanted to take my time to form my thoughts. As you heard in part one, there was some voice messages that I included at the end of that video, which I will include those here for you now if you missed those.
The head cell came unraveled and it's twisted, and the autopilot just disconnected. I'm okay. I don't know what to do, and it's rough, and I'm not gonna be able to anchor with this head cell blowing around. I gotta figure some stuff out, and I'm by myself.
Later that evening, towards the end of part one, I had just passed Solomon's and was moving north, and sun was just about to go down, and I noticed a bubble in my head cell. And it had ended up there because I'd furled the cell incorrectly. And it was another issue that came up. So we just recently put a board on our starboard bow to support our tanks in error, because that is where our furling line runs to our furler. So I had inadvertently and in a rush furled the head sail when the wind started to pick up, the sails and the wind, and there was a storm off in the distance. So I being new, decided to furl the head sail to bring in the head sail completely. When I did that, I furled it the wrong way and it ended up getting twisted, and then there was a knot and there was a big bubble in the head sail that allowed wind to get in there. So going through the motions of that, I noticed it at a point where the wind started to really pick up. Then I didn't really have a good spot I didn't really have a opportunity to fix it before the weather hit. So about 20 minutes later, that bubble started to grow, and it started to really yank around the rigging quite a bit, and that's where that voicemail started to come into play. I was recording messages and sending them to Lisa to kind of keep her updated. And that one also kind of coincided with the autopilot also coming unplugged, which what happened was Molly had jumped back into V-berth and had hit a power cable, which I didn't know was really exposed. So a combination of errors and kind of half-hearted efforts caused a lot of headache. In the meantime, I was being hit with a quartering sea that was continuing to get worse. The wind was blowing 25 plus, and the waves in the Chesapeake, it was coming out of the southeast, and I was on the western shore. So those waves were getting built up pretty hard, and at some point I was definitely in 6 to 8 foot. So after a while of hand steering, I realized I needed to do something with the head sail because it was just flailing around. I was not going to be able to anchor. I wasn't going to be able to do anything. And eventually, it was going to rip the rigging down off the boat and demast the boat. It was going to be a really bad situation if I didn't address it quickly. So I got downstairs and corrected the autopilot, got it back working, and then went forward, untethered, because I didn't have one right there available, and I was really worried about it. I was able to let the head sail down via the halyard instead of untwisting it, and just dropped it right on the deck. And yeah, it was a rough night. We were just continuously getting the hell beat out of us in terms of waves. Now I don't have a head sail to help stabilize the boat. And it was just a rough go of it. Unfortunately, I didn't take any more video of that night. I was honestly worried for my safety. There was at points where I was concerned that we were going to be either in the dinghy or ditching altogether if we continued to have the issues we were having. It was that serious. Keep in mind, this was all south of Annapolis, and this is all because we decided to move on a schedule, and I was very keen on keeping moving forward because that's where Lisa and Ainsley were. In hindsight, which is always, being able to go back and post trip review things, I should have pulled into Solomon's when I noticed the sail was bubbled and I could have fixed it at an anchorage. And Lisa and Ainsley could have figured something out or done something or whatever, but ultimately that would have been their responsibility. I should have taken my safety into consideration and the boat into consideration, and I didn't. So ultimately kept on moving forward, and I got to just south of Annapolis, and I don't know, about 10-15 miles, and there was lightning off in the distance, and I pulled up a radar, and if I can find the text message I sent Lisa, I'll share that picture here. But in short, there was a storm coming. That was going to be pretty interesting. And this was already 2 o'clock in the morning. I was pretty defeated. And had made a decision to go to a specific anchorage just south of Annapolis because I was haggard. I was tired. I wasn't going to make it another 4 hours into the creeks or I wasn't going to be in a good shape to try to get to a mooring ball or anything like that. So I beelined it to that anchorage. In the meantime, I knew we were not going to outrun this storm. We weren't going to be able to put ourselves in a position to not get hit by it. So the Dodger was up, and I grabbed everything. Autopilot was working, and the engine was going, and we grabbed all of our things and moved up under the Dodger and prayed, for lack of a better word, just hoped that we'd be okay and trust in the autopilot and let it do its thing. So we pulled into the anchorage the next morning pulled into the anchorage a couple hours later. So we pulled into the anchorage, I don't know, about an hour and a half, 2 hours after we weathered that storm. Got to the other side of it. It was really just a lot of wind and rain, a little bit of lightning, but nothing crazy or severe. Pulled into the anchorage. I dropped the hook and went to sleep. I was exhausted. And by the way, throughout all of this, about right after the head sail debacle, I got a low voltage warning on our batteries. So our batteries were dying because I was running all the electronics, and we didn't have our DC to DC charger hooked up correctly. Another error on our part. So we weren't charging the batteries via the engine. So, and the alternator wasn't charging either. So everything was falling apart. So I had to run the generator while also running the motor on the diesel on the boat to kind of get us in a safe place. So it's a very scary ordeal. Not something I would recommend anybody go through. But the next day, I was able to kind of round the corner. It was literally around the corner from Annapolis. And we got to Annapolis and settled there for a few days. Ultimately, I say all this to tell you that sailing on a schedule, especially if you're becoming into this or coming into this new, don't do it. Don't try to parallel somebody on land. that maybe is doing, maybe moving your car or whatever, don't do it. Put yourself in a position to take your time, have a redundant plan to a redundant plan, just have a backup to a backup, and know your ditch points. Know where you're going to be. I am good at no planning in that way. Where I have failed to make some decisions correctly is when to leverage those in the right way. Know your plans, know where you can bail out at, and then don't be afraid to pull that trigger. I was under a little bit of pressure here to keep moving, and we paid for it. We have a tear in our head cell that we've got to have fixed, and ultimately it was a humbling experience. Now I will tell you Now I will tell you when I got to Annapolis, I felt like I was on top of the world. I could conquer anything, I could do anything, because I did do everything. And outside of the issues that happened on the boat, outside of the issues that we had on the boat did fantastic. There was nothing the boat had an issue with that wasn't our doing. And only because we were in a rush, we for lack of a better term, just had temporary solutions to things that deserved permanent fixes. And we've learned that. And we're committed to ourselves to never push the situation again unless we have permanent fixes to the things we put in place. These may all sound like things that as a mariner, but we didn't, and we learned some lessons. And I hope by talking about this and owning up to these shortcomings and being very transparent about our experience, if it helps one person, it did its purpose. So, with that being said, what a great experience to go through in hindsight, because I learned a lot about myself and my boat, and what I'm capable of, and what I'm not, and what our weaknesses are. It's only going to make us stronger from here. So, if you haven't already done so, like, subscribe, follow, comment. Down below, tell me about an experience you had, which maybe you learned some humbling experiences. I'd love to hear about it.